What do the NCAA basketball tournament and the Indiana State Legislature have in common? Well, both are heading to their own Final Four this weekend. That would be 4 teams for the tourney and 4 weeks for the General Assembly. And there is a lot of action on the courts and as well as in the chambers of the State House. And we will get a legislative update on it all next on this week's Primetime. I waited all week to use that.
Time, right? Perfect time.
And good evening, I'm Bruce Haines. With us today is 15th District Republican State Senator and Assistant Majority Floor Leader Liz Brown. And we invite you to join our conversation as well. You can call in your questions and comments by using the number that you see on the screen. And Liz, thank you. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to be back.
Appreciate it. I wanted to start with something that was kind of a way of perhaps giving our viewers a picture of what may well be the rhythm of these days. The Indiana Capitol Chronicle had run an article about a day in the life. And they talked of Wednesday as a 10-committee day for the Indiana General Assembly. 150 lawmakers dashing from room to room to hear testimony, explain bills, broker compromises, then add in caffeine and sugar from the snack shack, and you have a typical Wednesday. Right now, you're in the second half of the second half. What kind of a pace of things is it for you?
It's gotten a little more hectic. I always bring my coffee mug and my thermos for the day, so I'm self-sufficient. But yeah, I mean, we're getting close to figuring out the budget and education funding and road funding. There's plus just the regular legislation that's flowing, so.
Yeah, it's all moving, and the movement is the key thing.
I actually was running back and forth between meeting rooms because I had to vote and I had to go to another one.
Yes, so. and in fact, the article gave a high credit because you were at a health meeting on the 4th floor and then down to a Judiciary Committee meting in the basement of the State House.
Yes.
And you were there at 1:30.
Yes. I try to start on time, yes.
and it's important to see how timely some of that business was in Judiciary. Joanna King, Representative King, was here last week saying additional magistrates were needed to improve some of the efficiency of the Elkhart court system. And this was one of the bills that Judiciary had picked up, which I think is now in appropriations. But
yes.
Now that we're here this week with 7 days difference, is there an update on that one?
Yeah, so the way that works is because we're going to be funding more courts, because the state pays for the judges' salaries, it has to go through appropriations after we pass it in committee, and we only adopt new courts if we have a formula and it shows that there's a need, and they weigh them by misdemeanor cases and murder cases, felony cases, things like that. And so we've done that consistently since I've been there, and but now this will be the first year where we take a look at all of the courts and all the counties and decide where we need to start making some cuts, and that's something we probably should have done a while ago, because the way it works is every county has to constitutionally have a circuit court, so every county has one court. But some of them have superior courts and magistrates, et cetera. And so we need to make sure that they're all working at capacity, because that's a burden to the taxpayers ultimately, because it comes out of our general fund.
And so because of a money factor, this is why appropriations needs to weigh in on that.
Yes, yes, because we're adding, I think, 9 positions.
Okay.
Yes, total.
I also could appreciate, and I think all of us can see when it is a budget building session. You didn't just have many budget hearings, you had many, many budget hearings.
Yes.
You said recently on the state budget bill. It's a tight year and there's a tight deadline. I think April 10 is something coming up soon for a Senate bill to come forward, or the Senate's version of 1001?
Yes, but if any bill that has to come through the Senate has what we call fiscal. In other words, money is expected to be spent, for something, whether it's education or a project or roads. It has to be recommitted before April 3rd. And then it has to get on the appropriation calendar. And then that day, the appropriations meets on Thursday, and that day, everything has to be done by, I think it's 12:30. So I've been here, and sometimes we might have 10, 15 bills that day. And so we'll start, 8:30, but we're going to be moving. And if people have been lollygagging and they haven't moved their bills through committee, then it doesn't matter how great it is. If it has a fiscal to it, then it doesn't get hurt if they haven't moved it through. So I try to move my committee hearings, put things in. And I deliberately had that courts bill on Wednesday knowing I had a 2-week, or a week cushion to get it straight before it would go on to appropriations. So.
And I'm recalling off notes, but I hope I have this right, that you're also involved in a committee regarding school funding?
Yes.
Speaking of deadlines and funding and fiscal implication?
That is huge. Education funding is 50% of our budget. And so of the appropriations, there are 3 of us that just look at K-12 funding. And so we're looking at what we call the foundation, what every school gets per student. And then we look at, what we call the complexity, which is we understand that lower socioeconomic factors, typically those children might need a little more money to help them, stay on track. And then things like special ed needs and some other things, CTE. So we got to figure out where to put that money. Mm-hmm. And that is definitely moving pieces on the board.
Oh, yeah. Well, and this is where April disappears from the calendar. Because
yes.
If you have April 3rd, you mentioned April 10, then we have the revenue report that
yes.
comes out about April 15?
Well, I'm hearing it might be later than that, and that's a problem. We thought we have to constitutionally be done by April 29th to have our budget. Mm-hmm. We have to have a budget, and we will. It'll be a balanced budget, but I've been hearing that it might be later, the forecast, and so we can't really plug all the numbers in. The Medicaid's an issue until we actually know what we're projected to have, and we know it's going to be tight. As Senator Mishler said before appropriation budget hearings, if you're not in the budget, it's going to be hard to get in, and if you're in, you might still not stay in. And we've been actively looking at programs and processes to streamline. So. Yeah.
One additional complication, perhaps, certainly something not planned. On Tuesday of this week, Indiana health officials received word of the federal government pulling back on about $11 billion nationwide that had been sent to states and health departments during the COVID-19 pandemic. That's about $40 million loss or so for Indiana, and I think in a hearing on the Health and Provider Services Committee, this came up. What kind of impact does the loss of $40 million have? It would seem on the surface a lot.
Yeah, I could. I mean, I think I've heard that it doesn't really affect Allen County, but that doesn't mean, there aren't some programs out there. I haven't heard yet which programs have yet that, had anticipated that money are not going to be funded. But at the same time, we're waiting to hear what the feds are going to do on Medicaid because we have different Medicaid programs, and we have what's called an enhanced match for some of them, where it's a higher match in the dollars that the state puts in. We draw down from the federal government to fund our Medicaid program. So that's another big problem, because we know we are about $400 to $500 million short in what had been projected in the current fiscal year on Medicaid, or for current budget. So yeah, a lot of unknowns right now.
We are talking with Indiana State Senator Liz Brown on Primetime. If you'd like to join us, you see the phone number on the screen. Please call in. I was going to say dial in, but you can punch in too in this modern era. One of the things that comes to mind in legislation that you and Senator Glick brought forward, eyewitness identification procedures is the
yes.
call of Senate Bill 141. And immediately you flash to all TV dramas where there's a lineup at the police station.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about the background and maybe now then the forward movement of this measure.
Yes. Actually, last year was flipped. Senator Glick was the lead, Senator Sue Glick from up in Steuben, and then I was second. This year, because we added an AI component to it, there was a concern in other states where some police departments, not here in Indiana, had used an AI process to sort of create a mugshot out of whole cloth and actually use that to arrest someone. So we wanted to make sure that didn't happen in the state of Indiana. And so that's primarily what that bill does, tighten up the lineups. And, we had great support from state police and other law enforcement. They want everything to be by the book as well. So, but yes, they did point out that the original draft of the language is, that's not really how we do it.
Right.
So we don't actually put people in lineups anymore.
Right.
So, yeah.
It's back to the Senate for consideration, so its journey continues. Your parental rights bill was debated in the House Judiciary Committee on Monday. It gained its committee approval and moved to the full House. It's being described as a measure to strengthen parental rights in Indiana law. How so?
Yes. We had some tough testimony. It starts in the Senate. It was my bill through Judiciary, and we had some really, really tough stories from parents involved in DCS, whether they were foster parents or parents who, frankly, I think DCS would admit had mistakenly sort of captured them. And so it's just giving the parents more rights. It's not saying, obviously, that you can abuse your children or anything like that, but there were instances where DCS wouldn't even tell the parents, who eventually it was found that there was no abuse. It was turned out for several cases they didn't understand the child had a connective tissues disorder, which caused the child to have some bruising, et cetera, or some nutritional issues with some undiagnosed liver issues where they had some bruising. And therefore, by our mandatory reporting, pediatrician reports, babies are taken away, eventually getting back. But there were times when those babies were out of the parents' arms, they didn't even tell the parents what medical treatments they were receiving. And, these are not parents who are losing rights to their child. They receive their child back. So, we didn't have a whole lot of pushback, and the stories were pretty tough to listen to. So I think it just sets it right that, yes, we want parents to be the fundamental decision makers for their children. So.
And this is a bill we've heard before, but this is a chance to get it over the finish line.
Yes, and I'm pretty confident that one will move as well.
We did not have time in your first visit. I think this happened shortly after your February appearance, but you had a cybersecurity bill passed the Senate that would establish a cybersecurity insurance program. How does that work?
Not quite insurance. So actually, I had an AI Task Force Cybersecurity Together bill a couple years ago, and the cybersecurity piece was brought to me because it was for some school systems.
Okay.
Their insurance rates were going up. And so can we create a pool where if there's ever money, and there's not in the bill, if there's ever money, could it help offset their premiums? We're not trying to create an insurance plan on our own, but could we help? But then with that, we've also decided we need to make sure that our local units of government have best practices in this space, right? We don't want our students' data to be hacked. We don't want our utility systems to be hacked, et cetera, right, and shut down. And there have been a few in the state. So, the insurance piece, that comes after the fact when there's been a hack or ransomware. We don't really even want that to happen. We want there to be best practices ahead of time. So the bigger part of the bill is really saying, units of government, you have 2 years, whether it's a school system or the city of Fort Wayne, and I didn't get any pushback from anybody like, we can't do this. I think they're all want to be on board, and we have the Indiana Office of Technology that's there ready to help them figure it out. So that's really the crux of the bill, saying we're going to try to make sure that all of our units of government who have our data, right, in so many ways, that they are performing the best that they can in the cybersecurity space and keeping our data secure.
Got it. So many different measures in different spaces. There's like a quilt of legislative activity taking place within this session as we move forward. And one of those we talked about in February, and so we can get an update too on this as well, the IAC 3.0, Senate Bill 473. First, explain to the group what IAC stands for and why we're in 3.0 territory.
I know, it was such a large bill. This is the third year I've had it. I kind of have, kidding. Increasing access to care for Hoosiers everywhere, IAC. So we don't typically have bills that have so many different health, different issues in it, but they just are so important, and they really did these different issues. The point was to make it easier for providers, people who are providing some kind of health care, to actually do it without the red tape, people who wanted to be a provider, like a CNA, those sorts of things, try to make it easier for them to get their licensing, and at the same time, sometimes in, whether the person receiving the care or treatment, how can they get it easier? So we streamlined the CNA program. We helped long-term care facilities hopefully actually get paid when they're supposed to sooner. So, yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. So.
And as of now, each one of these builds on the other.
Yes.
It sounds like.
Yes, and some of them are, nobody was really pushing, for example, to streamline the CNA licensing and how that all worked, but those people are so valuable in our system, and the home healthcare aides, et cetera. So we were overdue, and so sometimes these things stand alone in a bill. People might think there's something more important. I just thought this would be really important to try to move as many of these sort of smaller issues over, because it's all good for those of us receiving the care.
Yeah,
so.
It's in the House Committee on Public Health.
Yes.
I think.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think we just heard it last week. So.
Okay. Very good. We want to welcome Lee to the program, who has called in with a question that we can discuss, and it's one that comes up every year about now. Could you please address the discontinuation of the daylight savings time bill?
Yeah, I don't know if there was even a bill this year. I know there was not one filed in my committee. I will confess that since we live by our cell phones, we did not change our clocks and had to go to church later that day, which hasn't happened in years. So I sympathize, but I don't know if there's I wasn't in the legislature when it happened the first time, but my understanding that it was quite the battle. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if there is the will. I'd be interested in discussing it for sure, but there's 149 other people you have to convince, so.
Right.
Yeah.
It is always a reminder to change your smoke detector battery, too, while
yeah,
doing all of these things at the same time. Lee, thank you very much for reaching out. We're in kind of a lightning round segment here in a way, because there are a couple of other pieces that are worth a moment. House Bill 1004, price caps on nonprofit hospital charges.
Yeah, I was pretty vocal in committee. I voted no. I'm not a fan of price caps for anything. I don't think that's a fiscal conservative Republican value. However, I understand healthcare costs are pricey in Indiana. So I think particularly Senator Tyler Johnson has been working very, very hard in this space and on that bill. And we just had he called an all stakeholders meeting the other day, and I think we will get to a better place, but it's complicated. I mean, there's you have the federal government involved in Medicare payments, Medicaid payments, the state gets to set Medicaid rate. So there's a lot to figure out, because, we don't want people to lose access to care either. And, personally, I think up here in Northeast Indiana, we've been blessed with great healthcare systems, so.
Right.
Yeah.
And staying in the health field, Senate Bill 480 on prior authorization, that usually gets everyone's attention, those two little words.
Yes, yes. I mean, what could be more painful than thinking you're going to have, whatever, bunion surgery or major knee, neck, back surgery, and then find out the day before, never mind, it's been canceled. So that has been something that has really bothered me. I carried legislation early on trying to fix that space. Senator Johnson, again, is doing a great job. And it just wastes everyone's time, right? I mean, physicians are waiting, they can't do the procedure, so now the surgical suite is empty, wasted, somebody's time. And at the same time, a patient may be in pain trying to get back to work and get something fixed. So hopefully, we can fix that too. I think Senator Johnson, again, he's worked very hard on that bill, and I'm confident that it's moved out of the Senate, that it'll pass the House.
One that passed early, I think, in this session was minor access and use of social media, Senate Bill 11.
Yes, I heard that right out of the gate. Senator Bohacek was the lead from Michigan City area. I agree with him 100%. We didn't really get pushback from parents, but I think that when you look at what our children are exposed to, these apps are really good at figuring out how to manipulate kids, I think. And also what they claim is, age appropriate. I don't think all of us necessarily think that. And so his bill was just saying you're going to give parents more rights and control. And if a parent says, I don't care if my kid, has full access, then they can do that. But I think it's been held up in the House. And I think Senator Bohacek is trying to figure out a way to amend it into another bill. So I hope he's successful.
Got it. Moving to something that is a tough segue, but a very positive cause, Senate Bill 488, a skills training pilot program. This is now in House Ways and Means and Workforce Development Connected.
Yes, this was brought to me late in the last year, and it was, I think I was probably the least experienced in this area. I'm not on those committees, but they needed someone to bring the legislation, and I really admire the Department of Workforce Development and the people who brought this to me. They're just looking for innovative ways to get people to work, and part of the idea is, there's this cliff, so people on benefits can only work so much, and we want them to move to full-time employment and better credentials so they can, live and get off of some of the services that we provide, but they're in between a rock and a hard place. So that's one of the goals of this. Mm-hmm. Again, the funding of it is an issue, but I'm confident it's moved already through our side and the House committee, so I'm confident. And I sent it to a brand new legislator, Representative Lopez, but this is his area of expertise. So if anyone can get it done, he will.
Got it. Somewhere in the program had to be the reference to property tax reform.
Of course.
That's the other, if you had a top five, it's in there somewhere. We last had a proposal from Senate Republicans, House Ways and Means Committee Chair Jeff Thompson, one from the governor. What is your sense of where we are now with property tax?
Yeah, I think that the Senate Bill 1, as was introduced, was an ambitious plan from Governor Braun's office, but it was a $4 billion hit to the locals, and it wasn't a long-term fix anyway. And so I don't sit on Tax and Fiscal, which amended the bill, but we also knew that the House members, particularly Representative Thompson, has been working on this a long time and understands as well that we need a long-term fix, not just, one-time fixes. And so I'm confident that he'll figure out a way. I think they're working on a formula. And part of it, frankly, is, we have some good local units of government and not so good. And part of the problem is some of the local units of government understand if they keep their debt up, then they get to, take more out of the property taxes called the levy. And it's one big pot. And so, for example, if the city of Fort Wayne takes too much, which they haven't, thank goodness, then the airport authority or the library gets less, or Fort Wayne Community Schools gets less, right? However that works. So we need to make sure that our locals understand their obligations to their own taxpayers, but also that they affect everybody. So that's not something I'm working on, but I'm definitely watching.
Yeah. One thing I want to touch on, and with less than 2 minutes, it's almost unfair to ask you this, but earlier this month, Indiana became the 11th state to issue an identical call for a convention to amend congressional term limits in the U.S. Constitution. What's your understanding of this, and why should or shouldn't this happen?
Well, I supported that resolution. I also heard that through my committee. And when I first got elected to this office, I met with the Convention of States individuals. And, there are different ways to amend our Constitution, right? And this is us calling ourselves in and having this convention, and I fully support it. And I think there are several other states that have to sign on before we can actually move forward with this. But there is some consternation by some. They call runaway delegates. They think that, if we have this convention of states, then all sorts of crazy people will come and amend our Constitution in different ways. There are a lot more controls on that. But I think we, the people, should have the opportunity instead of waiting, for example, from Congress to. So I think it's a good start. And I think people are frustrated with Congress and the federal government and the lack of, really getting things done. So this will spur them on, maybe.
Yeah. Best wishes for the rest of the journey as we go. Clearly, a lot in a short space. Lots of information available at in.gov under General Assembly. That's where you'll find Liz Brown and Assistant Majority Floor Leader, State Senator for District 15. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for watching as well. For all of us with Primetime, I'm Bruce Haines. Take care, and we'll see you again here next week. Good night. The preceding program on PBS Fort Wayne was made possible in part by
The Rogers Company has been conducting business in Northeast Indiana since 1944 as Rogers Markets and now as the Rogers Company with commercial property and real estate development. Pleased to support local not-for-profits and PBS Fort Wayne. The Regional Chamber of Northeast Indiana advocates for world-class infrastructure, a competitive business climate, 21st century talent, and rural investment. One region, one voice. NEINadvocates.com. Purdue University Fort Wayne will host Marcus Collins, cultural scholar and professor, Thursday, February 27th at 7:30 as part of the Omnibus Speaker Series, inspiring fresh and diverse thoughts. Details at pfw.edu/omnibus.